Why use Power Query? It is part of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem with low-code solutions like Power App or Power Automate. This means that if you're not a fan of programming, you can still use Power Query unlike VBA. Power Query is part both of Excel and Power BI. Thanks to its connectors, it allows you to use multiple data sources. These are not limited to Excel or text files. You can also do web scraping or import a native PDF file. Power Query frees us from the 1 million row limitation of Excel and is efficient handling big files. Ultimately, this is a solution for automation. Think of all the recurrent processes of your company, the monthly reporting, the weekly flash sales report, etc. Power Query is a great way to do data cleansing efficiently in a unified process. This means no more multiple sheets, no more multiple formulas, and no more multiple Excel files. Hello, this is Paris calling Sydney. We're live. Good morning or good evening depending on your time zone. Thank you for joining this session about Power Query for financial reporting. Thank you to Liam for organizing this event, and remember that all benefits will be donated to a charity. My name is Vincent Lacomme and I'm very happy to host this session. Feel free to make any comment or ask any question in the chat, and if you are seeing this as a replay, you can also comment. Let's make it a fun session, get comfortable, and let's start. I'm a French chartered accountant, CPA, and auditor. My daily work often involves handling complex data files and harvesting the relevant information. As years go by, accountants, CFOs, business controllers, etc., have to manipulate more and more data as it comes from numerous sources. Power Query is one of the tools that helps me to manage financial and HR data and turn them into business intelligence. To set the stage, why would you use Power Query for your financial needs rather than Excel formulas or VBA? Power Query would win versus Excel formulas for its robustness and automation capabilities. However, Excel formulas still retain one major advantage, which is its capacity to be easy to understand by beginners in Excel and a rather smooth audit trail. So Excel formulas might be more flexible for users that are not advanced. In terms of comparison with VBA, I often read that VBA is dead because of Power Query. In a lot of cases, I would agree, but I would also argue that VBA has the ability to manipulate Windows files, to copy them, to move them, or to rename them. And more commonly, VBA can use other program libraries and create user forms. Let's dive right into our example. I will assume that you are familiar with the user interface of Power Query and try not to go too much into M code. There are very good videos about the basics of Power Query. I will aim to address the financial needs. During this session, we will have only one global example based on a general ledger export from an accounting software. This is a frequent input for us to audit, to prepare a reporting, etc. Our objectives are the following. We will start with data cleansing operations on a general ledger of accounting entries in order to create a clean trial balance. Then we will consolidate trial balances from different companies and collect correction entries. Ultimately, we will map out a reporting. If you are not familiar with this kind of files or actions, please stay with us as you can still transpose this example for other needs like payroll documents or any financial files. Here is a quick rundown of use cases of our demonstration today. Monthly group reporting, dashboard, accounting software migration, consolidated statements preparation. Before we start, I'd like to show you the input and the output files. This is the original general ledger. As you can see, this file contains one account and then multiple entries. What we would like to get is the following. In this case, the accounts and accounting entries are on the same row. Let me go back. Here we have subtotals, we have useless columns, and we have useless headers. I will come back to all the issues in a moment. So our first step will be to convert this general ledger to a trial balance with a bit of cleaning thanks to Power Query. I often have seen CFOs working very hard to harness a clumsy general ledger in Excel. How many hours have you spent making manual corrections? Like everyone else, I admit losing time because I had monthly deadlines to meet and never took the time to think to automate the process. However, you can easily optimize your reporting process by eliminating redundant actions. And, spoiler alert, you don't need to be a master of the M Power Query language or even VBA. We will see some very simple functions in Power Query that are quite helpful. But first, let's look at the general ledger exports. The problems we have with these files are, first, there are subtotals for each account that we don't need. And the account number is not repeated for every row. So if I want to filter on all the rows for account 9100 for loans, I can't do it with this general ledger in the current format. And we will try to have one row with one account, one entry. The second problem is the date formatting. It's not compatible with the Excel filter options. We will see how to make it correct. We have useless columns that we will delete, and we have a header title and totals at the bottom of the table and at the top that we will remove. So to accomplish all these actions, we could do Excel formula. The old me would have done Excel formulas or perhaps VBA. But if you need to produce this reporting every month, you will need to replicate these Excel formulas every time, which is quite time-consuming. That is why the new me is in favor of Power Query. Let's see. I will create a new Excel file and import my general ledger file using the Power Query Get and Transform menu in the Data ribbon here. New query, from file, from workbook. Then I'm choosing the correct file. I'm choosing inside the general ledger the right sheet. In this case, there is only one, and I'm going to transform the data in Power Query. All right. The first action I'm going to do is remove the useless top rows in order to get the right header. To do that, Power Query has a function to remove all the top rows. In the Home ribbon, Reduce Row, remove top rows. I will remove the first row in order to have the second row as the first. So number of rows, 1. All right. Now I'm going to ask him to have this row as the header. in the home ribbon, here I have use first row as headers. Fine. Now I'm going to remove the useless columns. This column contains the account number second time because it's already in the first column here, so I will remove it. This column contains the financial year dates. I do not need them. This column is empty, so I remove using the delete keypad on my keyboard. Fine. Now I only have the useful columns. We're going to move to more interesting things. Now we are going to create a column with the account number. Let me remind you that the account number appears that way. In the first column called date, we have both the account number as the header of the entries and then the dates. We're going to isolate the account number in another column so that in the first column we only have the dates. To do that, we must find a common thing that will allow to identify the rows with account IDs versus the rows with dates. In this instance, I will use the journal column, which is empty whenever there is an account and has a value whenever there is a date. So let's go back to Power Query. I'm going to create a new column in the Add column, Custom column in the ribbon, account number. As I said, the right information is in the date column. I'm going to ask him that if the journal code is empty, that is null, because in Power Query it is null, then show me the date column value. Otherwise, so else, you will else null, because if the journal code is not null, we are on a row with a date, so we won't refer the account number. Okay. So in this column, we have the account numbers whenever they appear as a header. But our objective is to have these account numbers next to the rows with accounting entries. Fortunately for us, there is a simple function in Power Query that allows to fill down, and it's the way it's called, to fill down the value until there is another one. What I mean is, it will fill down this value here, here, and stop here because there is another value. So whenever we have an empty row, it will take the value on the previous row. Let's see about that. So in the transform ribbon, fill down. Okay, as you can see, account 901 is on the three first rows. Then we have account 902, etc. So we eliminated the issue of having both the account ID and date in the same column. We will now remove all the irrelevant rows containing the account number and subtotals. To do that, we will use the same trick by filtering the journal code and removing all null rows, because if the journal code is null, then it's a subtotal or an account number. We only want the accounting entries rows. So, okay. And here we go. Now we only have accounting entries with their account number on the right. Another tricky part is handling the date format. For that, we're going to use a bit of M code again by creating a custom column, date 2. The function we will use is date from, which will convert a date that is not properly formatted into a date type. Date from date. However, date from only handles a text typed column. In this instance, date is a whole number data type column, so it won't work. No problem, we will only need to add another function called number to text to convert the number to text. So number dot to text. Remember that M code is case sensitive, so you need to use the proper upper and lower case syntax. Okay. And now here we have the date in a more common format, which can be used by Excel. I will convert this as a date format. I live in France, so the date format is day, month, year. In certain countries you can have a different type, it's normal. Now I'm going to delete the original date column and reorganize to have the account number and date at the left of the table. All we need to do is a drag and drop of the columns to the left. As you can see here in the entry names, some rows are in uppercase and some rows are in lowercase. I will convert everything using the transform text column format to uppercase. It's pretty easy and efficient. As you can see here, I did not even need to do a formula. In Excel, you would use a formula. Here, all you had to do is go in a few menus to do that. Next, we need to set the data types. As you can see here, we have account numbers, but they are formatted as text. We will tell him that it's a whole number. The date, which I will rename to date, is correctly formatted, as you can see this little icon. The rest of the columns are in text. The amounts are in decimal numbers, so it's pretty good. I will now close and load in the Home ribbon to see the results in Excel. So here is the result. We have our general ledger with the account numbers and the entry numbers. We can do filter. I can say I want this account, for instance, and it's working. Before going to the next step, I'd like to show you how to do a conversion of this general ledger into a trial balance with Power Query. Of course, you might very well do that using a pivot table. It's pretty simple, but for the sake of the example, let's use Power Query. I'm going to reference the past query we did with the general ledger. Reference means that we are using the result from the previous query and adding additional steps. While if I had chosen duplicate, I would have copied every of the steps that are here and then added another steps. So duplicate would have doubled the tasks for Power Query, while here I'm using what has been done before and completing with additional steps. All right, so we have our general ledger and we're going to use the transform function group by advanced and group by account number and add debit and credit columns to sum. So it's pretty similar to a pivot table. Here we have the lines and here we would have the columns. Okay, so here we have all the account numbers and the total of debits and credits here. That's our trial balance, and here is the results in Excel. This was a small example of what you can do. Once you are familiar with this, you can go deeper with the M language and prepare more elaborate transformation. Once you get past configuring these steps, it's jackpot time. Next time you import a general ledger, all you will have to do is copy and paste the general ledger Excel file in your Explorer folder and click Write and Refresh. There will be no need to rewrite or copy and paste formulas. Isn't life good? So just to show you that it is true, I'm going to make a small modification in my original general ledger file. The first account balance is a credit of 2,500, as you can see on the top of this file. Here I'm going to change it to 10,000 euros. I'm saving this file and going back here, right click, refresh. And here it goes. It was very fast. And if I go back to my general ledger here, it's still at 250, right click, refresh, and here, and we have 10,000 now. Now I have a clean trial balance, and I can also drill down to my general ledger should I need more detail. Our second step is consolidating multiple trial balances. This could be relevant for a group reporting, for instance. So let's see our files. Here we have two Excel files, each containing a trial balance. In a normal case, we would open each trial balance files, copy them to another file, and consolidate them that way. It can be quite time consuming, especially if you have a lot of files. Here, for the sake of the example, we only have two. Power Query will do this consolidation process in a limited time. Let's start. I'm creating a new document, which I'm saving. Once again, I'm going to open Data, New Query from File, but this time I'm not going to import a single file, but a folder. So, alright, I've selected the folder containing my two trial balance and clicking Open. I will choose Transform Data to open these files in Power Query. As you have seen, Power Query has listed all the files in the folder with their names, the date accessed, etc. The first column actually contains all the data in these files. So to begin with, I'm going to remove all the columns on the right, which I don't need for the path, etc. All I need are the two first ones. In order to do that, I could have removed the other columns, but I can also click on Remove Other Columns here. Fine. Now I will click here on this icon with the two arrows, down arrows. Now Power Query is asking me what I want to extract from these files. in this case, it will be the sheet called File 1, and I'm clicking OK. Power Query generated all these functions and query here. It doesn't matter at this point, but don't remove these. Let's focus here on what we got. We have the trial balance, but I wanted to keep the name of the file. Obviously, Power Query has removed it. So let's show the steps here. Here we have a step where other columns were removed. I'm going to click on the setting icon and ask him to keep the name column. The name column will allow me to know which company this trial balance is from. So let's go back to the final step here. Okay. So I'm going to convert this as a company column and remove the TB and the extension file name using the replace values function. Right click, replace value. I will remove TB space and replace it with nothing. And likewise for the extension.xlsx, replace with nothing. Now I have a column with a company. As you can see, we had two trial balances, Decimal Technologies and Thornhill. And the trial balances are now appended in one single table thanks to Power Query. Fine. The next thing I like to do is integrate some correction entries, because in my reporting I will make some corrections because the subsidiaries I'm consolidating are not applying the same method than me. For that, I have created corrections files. I've created two files. You can do more, of course, or even only one. The interco entries file contains correction between companies. These are correction entries that we want to add to the trial balance, because as I said, the trial balance are the original entities trial balance that we want to correct. So I will have to import this file. Okay, so we're going to create another query just the same way we did for the original trial balances. So right click, new query, file, folder. So everything is in the corrections folder. I'm opening the folder. Transform data. Corrections. In this instance, I don't need the file name because there is a column in the tables which tells me if it's an adjustment entry or an interco entry. So I will only keep the content column. So I click on the down arrow icon, select the sheet, OK. And now I have all the adjustment correction entries in one table coming from two different files. I don't need this column, and as you can see, blank rows were imported. I will filter them out. Fine. So now I have two tables, the source trial balance and the corrections. I will merge them. I will append them. That is what we call it in Power Query. For that, I will append them both in the source trial balance query using combine append queries. I could do the append operation in a new query, but in this case I will remain in source TB. I will append the current table with the corrections table. Fine. And now hopefully we will have the correction entries rows. As you can see, they are here. All right, I forgot to do one thing. It's for the original trial balances. I should have marked them as trial balances. So what's great about Power Query is that we have steps here. I've just appended the query. I can go back to the previous step and add the source column in order to have them in all the rows. So add columns, custom column, source, and I will call it 0 trial balance. Okay, now I'm getting back to my appended query step. And as you can see, we have the trial balance rows, which are marked as such, and the correction entries. As you can see as well, the balance is null, is empty for the correction entries. Why? Because the correction entries are missing a balance column. I will add it again, add column, custom column, balance. You have to use the same name in both queries to append them in the same column. So if I were to add balance 2, when appending, I would have balance and then balance 2. Balance, and what is the balance? It's debit minus credit. But this won't work because in Power Query, null values are not equal to 0. So it doesn't know how to handle a null. For that, I'm going to use another function called list.sum. And I have to use this syntax. And now the balance is correctly computed. Let's go back to the appended query, source TB, and here the balance column is correctly filled in every rows. Fine, let's see the result in Excel. Close and load. So he's created a sheet with the corrections. And here we have the trial balance consolidated. And now we have both the trial balances and correction entries. Let's see if I were to add a third company to the mix, because here we have decimal and Fornil, what would be the result? So I'm saving this file and going back to my Explorer. So here I had the two trial balances and I'm going to add a third one. Going back here, I used to have 160 rows. Let's click right, refresh. And now I have 237 rows, including the third company called Finch Industries I just added in the folder with all my trial balances. So all I had to do to add this additional company was to copy and paste an Excel file. It's pretty amazing. And this could work for 40 companies, 50 companies, 100 companies. As you can see, we have consolidated multiple files. This might seem long to do, But think of how much time you will gain next month when you use new trial balances. Once again, a refresh is all you need. No need to change the folder path, no need to change the formulas. As long as you use the same folder and use the same kind of files, it will work. Let's move to our third and final step. Once we have our data cleaned up, unified in one single table, we can map out the reporting. Generally, a financial reporting will not use the accounting number that we have seen here. It will use the financial statements reporting names like equities, like debts, like cash, etc. In order to come to that point, I have created a bridge between the chart of accounts and the reporting names. Here we have fixed assets, tax assets, etc. For each account, we have the correspondence in the financial statements. And we will use Power Query to bridge the general ledger or trial balance in this case with these reporting names in order to finally do it. So I'm going back to my file with the trial balances and reopening Power Query. I will import the chart of account bridge. I will use the table chart of accounts, and now it's loaded here. What I would like is for each of these rows to have the reporting name on the right. For that, you would generally do a VLOOKUP in Excel, which is easy enough. In Power Query, we use something called merge queries. Merge queries actually uses one table and adds columns from another table. It's very important to make the difference between merging columns and appending rows. Those are two different functions with different results in Power Query. So let's merge queries. This time it will be asking me what is the common columns between both sources. Let's see here, I'm on the top part I have my trial balances, and on the bottom I have my chart of account map, and I have to tell him what is the common column between those two, like I would do in a VLOOKUP. But on a VLOOKUP, it would only work with the first column. Here, I could very well use this, the first column on the top and the third on the bottom, for instance. But never mind, here it's the first column. I have to tell him by clicking on the column which is the common column. Then I will do a left outer join. There are 6 types of joins, and there are very good videos on that on YouTube. Okay, so now it's created me a new column with a table. I will click on the arrow icon here to choose the column I want to add. As you can see here, it's a reproduction of my COA table here, which had 5 columns. The account name, the financial statement type, another type, and the reporting name. I don't need the account and accountant name because they are already in the left of my current queries, so I'm unselecting them. I don't need to use original column as prefix. Okay. And here we have, for each account, what is the correspondence between the account number and the reporting position. Let's close and load. Here we have our trial balance with 3 additional columns here. What's great is that I can now use this table as my source for my reporting. I could do sum ifs using this. I could do a pivot table, so I'm going to keep this brief as I think you know the rest. Let's do a pivot table. Oops. Let's do a pivot table. I can tell him the type, the reporting name, and the balance amount here, and the company here. So I pretty much can harvest the information I need and use it in a plenty number of ways. Remember that pivot table have a slicer function. I can slice by company and by source. Why? Suppose you were analyzing your revenue here. Okay, I'm going to filter it. I'm removing this. So my revenue here is 1,200,000, etc. I want to know what is the turnover for Decima Technologies. I can click here, 306. Finch Industries, Thornhill. Or I can choose all companies and then ask him the original trial balance amount to know the intercompany correction and other adjustments. So you can have an audit trail that is very smooth, very explicit using this. And if you want to go back because you're a fan of filters, here you can say I want the Thornhill trial balance original entries, and you have it. So an amount can be analyzed in a very thorough way. At this point, you might be disappointed in terms of reporting. Well, the point of this session was to show you how to handle the data, not to do an effective data viz. We have seen an example that is accessible to users that don't want to learn code or a language. You want more in terms of data viz, then you would need to use Power BI to prepare gorgeous visuals. The good news is that all the queries we have seen in Power Query can be used in Power Query for Excel, but also in Power Query for Power BI. And Power BI will add the extra layer of data viz for reporting for clients. And for audit purpose, I do think that Power Query in Excel might be more appropriate, as you can use the data more freely and paste it elsewhere. But that's a subject for another day. You may often hear that Excel is dead. I personally believe that there is a complementarity between Excel, Power Query, VBA, and Power BI. Each carry out its function, and one should profit from the best of each tool. Sometimes Excel formulas will be quite enough for simple needs. You might use VBA for more complex needs. And Power Query is in the middle and is paired with Power BI for data viz. There are other tools like Python and R that you can use as well. When asked whether Power Query is better than VBA, I answer that if you are starting, you should choose Power Query. It doesn't require coding at first, and it will cover most of your needs. If you need to go deeper, then the M language and VBA would be a solution. In a number of cases, I personally find it faster to program in Power Query rather than VBA macros. Power Query is a very powerful tool for my daily needs for financial reporting. As you can see, repetitive tasks can be automated and save a lot of time. Used with Power BI, this is an incredible tool for business intelligence that will be very useful for financial reporting. I hope you enjoyed this session and will be glad to answer your questions. I'd like to thank Liam for allowing me to host this session from France. Thank you for listening. See you soon.